All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. So, I'm Andrew, aka Eternally Recurring Mindgasms, for the purposes of this video. And I'm going to talk about this clip from the coder, AI researcher, and podcaster Lex Fridman's podcast that he did recently with Duncan Trussell, the hippie slash comedian slash podcaster who I love. And it was them discussing subjects like Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence, demons, reincarnation, and drugs. So I'm going to get into the clip here, and among other things, I thought it would be interesting to address something that they don't mention, which are the differences between eternal recurrence and reincarnation, because people use those interchangeably sometimes, but they're not the same thing. There are some differences. So I'm going to comment on those too. All right, so here we go.
Nietzsche has this thought experiment called eternal recurrence, where you get to relive your whole life over and over and over and over. And I think it's a way to bring to the surface of your mind the idea that every single moment in your life matters. It intensely matters, the bad and the good. And he kind of wants you to imagine that idea that every single decision you make throughout your life, you repeat over and over and over. And he wants you to respond to that. Do you feel horrible about that, or do you feel good about that? And you have to think through this idea in order to see where you stand in life. What is your relationship like with life? I actually want to read the way he first introduces that concept for people who are not familiar. What if someday or night a demon, by the way, he has a demon introduce this thought experiment. What if someday or night a demon were to steal after you into your loneliest loneliness and say to you, quote, "This life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more, and there will be nothing new in it. But every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh and everything unutterably small and great in your life will have to return to you, all in the same succession and sequence. Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or have you once experienced a tremendous moment when you would have answered him, 'You are a god, and never have I heard anything more divine'?" So are you terrified or excited by such a thought experiment when you're...
Nietzsche was such a beautiful writer. Unlike a lot of famous philosophers, he actually was a really good writer. A lot of them get really dry and boring, but have very fascinating philosophical concepts. Other continental philosophers like Heidegger or Hegel, for example, are terrible writers, but they have fascinating philosophical concepts that they explore. But yeah, he produced some really beautiful writing for sure.
when you apply it to your own life?
Excited.
Oh, even the dark stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure. Definitely. I mean, also that thing you're talking about, he kind of leaves out, maybe on purpose, because the thought experiment starts falling apart a little bit.
Yeah.
The amnesia between each loop. So the whole thing gets wiped. Now,
Also, he is setting up a binary too. What is it? Are you going to curse me, or is it going to be divine, that you have to think about reliving every single moment of your life eternally? And it seems like in that thought experiment, it seems like you would remember every moment of your life. That sounds like you could look at it as uplifting if you wanted to, because you could try to have the perfect life, but it also sounds really fucking stressful, because you would think, oh shit, I did that moment wrong, oh shit, I did that other moment wrong, and would perhaps lead to you stressing out of every moment of your life. It depends on how you look at it.
if the amnesia wasn't there, and yet somehow you were witnessing the non-autonomy implicit in what he's talking about, so you have to kind of watch yourself go through this rotten loop, then yeah, that's a description.
There's probably a boredom that comes into that, so you don't experience everything anew.
Exactly.
So the bad stuff, the good stuff, the newness of it is really important.
That's it. Yeah, this is the in Hades, when you die, there's a river. I think it's called Lethe. You ever heard of this? Lethe. You drink from it and you don't remember your past lives. And then when you're reborn, it's fresh and you don't have to. I mean, just think of like the amount of psychological help you would need to get over all the bullshit that happened in prior lives. You know, can you imagine if you're still resentful of something someone did to you in the 14th century? But it would compound. So
well, if you repeat the same thing over and over and over, there would be no difference. Maybe you would start to appreciate the nuance.
Yeah, this is they get more into reincarnation specifically in a few minutes, but this is one of the differences between eternal recurrence and reincarnation. With Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence, it's that you would just endlessly repeat the exact same life moment for moment over and over and over again in an endless cycle. With reincarnation, of course, the idea is that when you die, your body dies, but your soul gets reincarnated in another person's body somewhere else at another point in time, or sometimes you could get reincarnated as an animal or some other life form. I remember when I was a kid, I watched this movie about reincarnation, which was about a father and husband who dies and then gets reincarnated as the family's dog, and only the son starts to somehow realize that the soul of his father is in their family dog. I don't even remember the title of that movie because it was so long ago when I watched it. But yeah, reincarnation and Nietzsche's eternal recurrence are both interesting concepts, and they're similar, but there are some pretty key differences for sure.
Nuances more like when you watch the same movie over and over and over.
Yeah,
maybe you'll get to actually let go of this idea of all the positive possibilities that lay before you, but actually enjoy the moment much more. If you remember that you've lived this,
that's a good analogy, but it depends on the movie. Like if you're talking about one of your favorite movies, for me it would be Pulp Fiction and The Matrix. I could watch those over and over again, and I will watch those over and over again until I die. And because it's a form of entertainment, you can appreciate different aspects of it in every subsequent viewing. But if it's you having to be forced to live the same life, and you do remember, especially if you do remember it, that could be torturous. If you don't remember it, I guess it wouldn't really matter. But if you do, I think that would be much more torturous than just watching a movie, because you're experiencing it and you're having to know that you've done all the same things before over and over again. It kind of reminds me of the whole free will debate in philosophy, right? If you're repeating the same thing in the same things in the exact same way over and over again, then that's basically a deterministic universe and you don't have any free will, which is also depressing. And in the free will debate, I'm kind of agnostic about it. I used to buy Sam Harris's arguments, which I don't buy basically any of his arguments anymore about determinism and that free will is an illusion. I'm inclined to believe that free will is an illusion, but also it is a good idea to behave as if we have free will. But that doesn't mean that I'm not saying that to say that I'm a compatibilist, which is one of the other alternative theories in free will. I think that compatibilism is a cop-out. It's kind of changing the definition of free will to make it compatible with determinism, which really is fucking stupid and doesn't work at all, in my opinion. But anyway, yeah, there's some key differences between the analogy of watching a movie over and over again and actually living the same life in the exact same way over and over again.
This life 1,000 times, all the little things, the way somebody smiles, if you're been abused, the way somebody, like the pain of it, the suffering, the down that you feel, the experience of sadness, depression, fear, all that kind of stuff. You get to really, you get to also appreciate that that's part of life.
Yeah,
it's part of being alive.
Now, also in his experiment, if I was gonna, and I love the experiment from the perspective of like just where technology is now and simulation theory and stuff like that. But in that thought experiment, if this rotten demon immediately killed you, then within that it's a little more horrifying, because even in the first of all, you're trusting a fucking demon.
Why are you talking to a demon? Let's start there.
Yeah, because that is going to be, even before I get into like the metaphysics and like the implications and where is this life stored? Where's the loop stored? I mean, are we talking about some kind of unchanging data set or something? For that, you're like, why is there a fucking talking demon in my room trying to freak me out? You're going to want to autopsy the demon. Can you catch it? Does this apply to you, demon? And again, obviously, it's a fucking thought experiment. Nietzsche would be annoyed by me. But I think like you would still be able to entertain the joy. You'd have the joy of not knowing what's around the corner. You know, still, it's not like you know what's coming just because the demon said it's some kind of loop. In other words, the idea of being damned to your past decisions.
Yeah, especially if you have no memory of your past lives, then you could know that it's determined, but you would still be surprised by what happens because you wouldn't remember what's going to happen next, even if you have lived this exact same life and every moment in the exact same way previously.
It doesn't even work because you can't remember what decisions you're about to make. Yeah. So from that perspective, also, I think I'd be happy about it, or I would just think, oh, cool. I mean, it's a good story. I'm going to tell people about how this.
I wonder what the demon would actually look like in real life, because I suspect it would look like a charming, like a friend. Wouldn't they be a loved one? Wouldn't the demon come to you?
If they're trying to deceive you, they probably would that. If you're talking about in books and in movies, when you see demons, if they're trying to deceive you, they often appear as a loved one. But if they're just trying to scare you, or they're finally at the moment where they've deceived you into trapping you in some, like some sort of hell and some sort of prison in another dimension or in purgatory or some shit because they want to take your soul, then that's what the point in the horror movie when they get super fucking scary and look like a horrifying monster.
Through the mechanism, through the front door of love, not through the back door of evil, like malevolent manipulation.
Sure. I mean, if it's the truth, it's the truth, then that's, whether it's love or not, it's still good fundamentally.
I do like the idea of the.
I don't think that just as a separate statement itself, I don't think that's necessarily true. The truth is often terrible and a lie is often better. Like one example that tons of people bring up all the time is Hitler in the Holocaust, you know, like fucking murdering people, mass extermination camps, putting babies in ovens, torturing them, all kinds of fucking horrifying shit. Of course, like Stalin and Mao and communism and all that shit. And you can go back through history, Genghis Khan, all of the massacres that Alexander the Great did, all sorts of shit throughout history is true, but just lying to someone and saying that it didn't happen is better. Is part of why, you know, like things like Santa Claus are comforting to children, because it's a pleasant lie. And the alternative, when you learn that when you're a kid, I don't even remember when I found out that there's no Santa Claus, but I'm sure it was depressing. But yeah, the point is that it's not always the case that the truth is morally good. That's why, to go on a bit of a tangent, I think that the idea of like truth is not as valuable or important as love or hope, as my favorite atheist pragmatist philosopher Richard Rorty talks about. But anyway, that's just a little aside there.
The memory replay. I remember I went to a Neuralink event a few years ago and got to hang out with Elon. I remember how visceral it is that there's like a pig with a Neuralink in it, and you're talking about memory replays as a future, maybe far future possibility, and you realize, well, this is a very meaningful moment in my life. This could be a replay.
Yeah.
Like, of all the things you replay, it's probably, you know, there's certain magical moments in your life, whatever it is, certain people you've met for the first time, or certain things you've done for the first time with certain people, or not, just an awesome thing you did. And I remember just saying to him, like, I would probably want to replay this, this moment. And it just seemed very kind of, I mean, there's a recursive nature to it, but it seemed very real that this is something we would want to do, that the richness of life could be experienced through the replay, that's probably where it's experienced the most. Like, you could see life as a way to collect a bunch of cool memories, and then you get to sit back in your nice VR headset and replay the cool ones.
That's right. This is in Buddhism, you know, the idea.
But if he's talking about that in terms of specifically eternal recurrence, that wouldn't be that you live your life and then you like watch and replay the same moments. You would relive them over and over again. So again, there's how that analogy of watching one of your favorite movies doesn't work as well as actual recurrence itself. And he's about to get it into specifically more of the Buddhist concept of reincarnation.
Yeah, that like I struggle with is that there's a possibility of not reincarnating, of not coming back. That's the idea. Like this is.
Oh, see, I didn't know that about Buddhism. I've read a few books about it, so I'm mildly familiar with it, and I'm a fan of what I've learned. But I know that it's very different from a lot of popular misconceptions about it, and I know that it's there's a lot more for me to learn about it. But yeah, I didn't know that in Buddhism it's possible to not get reincarnated.
This is suffering here. Suffering is caused by attachment, and so if you like revise the idea of reincarnation or the Nietzsche's loop and look at it from, could this be possible, or how would this be possible technologically, then to me it makes a lot of sense. Like I've been thinking a lot about this very thing and the Nietzsche's idea, connecting to it. I had this, like, it sounds so dumb, but I was at the dentist getting nitrous oxide, high as a fucking kite, man. Yeah. And I had this idea. I was thinking about data. I was thinking, like, man, probably if I had to bet, there's some energetic form that we're not aware of that for a super advanced technology would be as detectable as like starlight, but something that we just don't even know what it is. Yeah. Quantum turbulence, who the fuck knows? Fill in the blank, whatever that X may be. But assuming that exists, that somehow data, even the most subtle things, the tiniest movements, whatever it may be, the emanations of your neurological process energetically, whatever it may be, is radiating out into space-time, then what if, like, the James Webb version of this for some advanced civilization is not that they're like looking at the nebula or whatever, but they're actually able to peer into the past and via some bizarre technology recreate whatever life, simulate whatever life was happening there.
That's an interesting concept to think about. If the, civilizations in the future had the technology to look not just through space, but also through time. And I know from, hearing from physicists that if the farther away you look, the actually technically, especially believe in the concept of space-time, which has been challenged by some physicists like Donald Hoffman, who I find really fascinating in his book about that, for example, who's also been on Lex Fridman's podcast. But just in the concept of space-time, if you're looking, I don't know, like 40 billion light years away, I think that's something like the equivalent of 40,000 years ago. So technically you're looking through time. But that's interesting to contemplate how if you're a society in the future, if you can look back in time or across time, even possibly in the future, without actually having to also look through space in the telescope. Like, you can just pinpoint an actual event in a specific place and just replay it for yourself. That would be a fascinating technology to be able to have. And it would dispel a hell of a lot of fucking myths about history. I'm sure there are innumerable or almost infinite myths about history, even for historians who probably could tell the general public an endless list of misconceptions about history.
Just by decoding that quantum energy, whatever it is. I'm only saying quantum because it's what dumb people say when they don't know. You just say
quantum, like I'm Deepak Chopra.
I don't know, but you know what I mean? You're decoding that. So meaning, in simulation theory, one of the big questions that pops up is why, and are we in one? And Elon has talked about, well, it's probably more of a probability than we're in one than we're not. In which case,
I'm going to get more into this if I talk about specifically the clip with them talking about simulation theory. But I used to be a fan of simulation theory, but I think this is kind of fucking dumb now. There's I forget who it was, but Elon Musk got that idea from this book called Superintelligence. Forget who the author is right now, but Nick Bostrom, that's the author. He's a philosopher, and I've read his book called Superintelligence, and it's an interesting concept. No, wait, no. Superintelligence is about AI, sorry. But he also, so it's not that book, but he talks about he talks about this idea of the simulation theory. That's where Elon Musk got it from. And you know, the idea is that probabilistically we already have rudimentary forms of virtual reality, and with the progression of technology, it's mathematically somehow a guarantee that in the future there will be way more advanced forms of virtual reality, to the point that they're indistinguishable from actual reality. And that means that every possible version of a future society in the future is mathematically a hell of a lot more probabilistically likely to be to have it means that mathematically we're a lot more likely to be living in a simulation than to not be living in one. Now, I don't remember the exact details of the argument other than that, to be fair, because it's been a while since I read the book, but that's also a dumb concept because, for one thing, it also depends on the theory and physics of there being multiple universes and multiple parallel realities being true. And this is a fascinating science fiction concept, but a lot of physicists also disagree with that. And I'm not saying that's not true, because I've read theories from a lot of physicists arguing one way or the other, and I just think one or the other could be true. So if that is true, that there are parallel realities occurring simultaneously, then that's more of a reason to think that simulation theory is true. But since we don't actually know one way or the other, the chances are basically like 50-50, because or maybe more in the other direction, that it's more, if it's a higher probability that we don't live in a simulation, because there's a higher probability that there are no parallel universes. And which means that if this is the only universe and there are not other ones, then the only reason that this would be a simulation is if there's this popular theory about aliens is true, is that, you know, aliens from some other point in the universe, or humans who lived here already and then left and colonized other planets, have this virtual reality technology and then created it for humans on Earth, or a simulation of humans on Earth. That's entirely possible, but it's also, I think it's unlikely. And also, it's just it's kind of just relying on faith, the assertion that it's so likely for virtual reality to become literally indistinguishable from reality in the future, that we're more likely to be in a simulation than to actually be in reality. That's assuming that we will be able to build virtual worlds that are indistinguishable from reality. And that does seem intellectually possible, or not intellectually, technologically possible. But is it technologically possible for you to build a virtual world that's indistinguishable from reality, but you can, to the point that not only is it indistinguishable, but you you enter the virtual reality, and then you forget that you are in the virtual reality? Because if you enter the virtual reality, even if it is indistinguishable from actual reality itself, presumably you would know that you just entered a virtual reality, unless it just erases your memory. And why would a technology do that? So this idea of simulation theory also hinges upon the faith claim that we've all consented or have been forced to entering this virtual reality against our will, and if we have consented to entering it, we have also consented to having our memories erased for some reason. I don't know why that would be. Or we've been forced into this virtual reality and our memories have been forcefully erased. Now, this is a fascinating concept to think about, and I love science fiction for that reason, but I don't see any reason why this would actually be true. This all just seems like fun fantasizing. So I really am extremely skeptical of this idea of simulation theory. It is exciting to think about, and I love science fiction, like I said, but I'm extremely skeptical, and I think it's highly unlikely that we actually do live in a simulation.
Case, what you're talking about is actually happening.
Yeah.
That loop you're talking about, we've decided to be here. This, of all the things, we decided this one. Oh, let's do that one again. I want to do that one. Let's do that. I love thinking about this because I love my family.
Yeah.
And it makes sense to me that if I'm going to replay some life or another, it's definitely going to be this one with my kids, my wife, with all the bullshit that's gone along with it. I'm still going to want to come back. So in Buddhism, that's attachment.
Yeah, but you weren't the one. Oh, you're saying you're the main player. You're not the NPC.
Well, I think we're dealing with all NPCs at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, depending on how you want to, I would say very advanced NPCs, like incredibly advanced NPCs compared to.
So if you believe in simulation theory, this ties back to, I guess, eternal recurrence, because if you view people in the simulation as NPCs, then that means that the determinism argument is true also, because if we're all NPCs, then we don't have free will. And if we're living, that's another aspect of simulation theory that I'm highly skeptical of. It also means that determinism is true and that we don't have free will. And this would definitely be true if we live in the situation, or the simulation rather, but we definitely don't know that we live in the simulation. We definitely don't know that the universe is it's deterministic, and we definitely don't know that we don't have free will. They're just there are compelling arguments to be made for those. I'm personally not a determinist either, but like I said, I'm also not convinced by free will, and I'm not a compatibilist. But those things would have to be true, and you would need to find evidence for these separately rather than just saying there's evidence for one of them, therefore the rest of them are true. That's why there never has actually been any evidence for simulation theory other than theoretical mathematical calculations that supposedly prove this hypothetical. But you can mathematically calculate and prove anything you want to, really. All sorts of other theories of physics have been proved to be mathematically possible. That doesn't mean they're actually mathematically happening. Like one that Joe Rogan has talked about before is about how the universe is a hologram. You can say it's mathematically been proved that the universe could be a hologram, or that we could be living in a simulation. These are exciting ideas to talk about, but I think they're unlikely to be true.
Fallout or something. We've got a lot of conversation options happening here. There's not like 4 things you can pick from.
Yeah,
but
there's a whole illusion of free will that's happening. We really do, depending where you are in the world, feel like you're free to decide any trajectory in your life that you want.
Which is pretty funny, right?
For an NPC, it's nice.
All right. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed me going through that little fascinating discussion about eternal recurrence and reincarnation. And I forgot that they had also talked about simulation theory in that clip. These are all fascinating ideas. Even though, like I said, I'm very skeptical of simulation theory, but it's still almost as fascinating to me as the idea of eternal recurrence and reincarnation, even though I don't think that eternal recurrence is actually happening either, and I don't think that reincarnation is happening, but for some reason I find those ideas to be more interesting than the others. Anyway, yeah, so that was a fascinating clip. Check out the full podcast and that whole clip yourselves. Duncan Trussell is always a fascinating and awesome guy, and Lex Fridman usually is too, I would say. And yes, thanks everyone for watching. Click that like button, share this everywhere. spread all these eternally recurring mindgasms everywhere in an eternally recurring fashion for the rest of your life. And yeah, click that bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. I think, oh yeah, probably the next one I'll do will be either on the new Rings of Power trailer or something trending on Twitter, or another book chat episode on one of my book series. And this weekend, I'm either going to be finally talking about that documentary with Dusty and Chris, who I always do movie chats with. The documentary is called Reversing Roe, which is about the decades-long process of evangelical Christian groups like the so-called moral majority pressuring Republican politicians to do an endless series of legislation that gradually led to the overturning of Roe versus Wade in the U.S. recently. We'll either be doing that this weekend or talking about the new House of the Dragon series, which is the prequel to the Game of Thrones show, of course. So that'd be interesting as well. And I'm also supposed to be going on the philosopher Ben Burgess's show this Thursday, I believe. So look forward to that too on his channel, Ben Burgess, which is Given an Argument. We're going to be doing a debate analysis of a debate between the lefty progressive Sam Cedar and the libertarian, I forget what his name is. I think it's Larry Charles, but I could be getting that name wrong. But anyway, yeah, check that out as well. Thanks everyone for watching. Oh yeah, check out my Patreon page. The link is in the description of the video as always. And if you give me $10 a month, you can vote on future topics, books, and movies that I will discuss both by myself and with others. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and grooves in the heart. And think about ideas like eternal recurrence, reincarnation, free will, determinism, and simulation theory. They're all fascinating ideas. And let me know what you think of my opinions about them in the comments. All right, thanks again, everyone, and adios until next time.